This year is proving to be one of the most trying times for our nation. The COVID-19 pandemic has made all of us create a new normal. But imagine trying to adjust to this new normal while dealing with an opioid addiction. And for our most vulnerable community, our seniors, this type of addiction is even harder to overcome. In Maryland, adults over 50 make up 29.5% of those with an opioid use disorder. This is a number we cannot ignore. In 2018, Rockville began its opioid awareness campaign, Rockville Goes Purple, which focuses on prevention, education, and information sharing on how to deal with the opioid crisis. This year's campaign, we're working to pull back the veil of shame and embarrassment that prevents some from getting the help they need. The Rockville Goes Purple Opioids Let's Talk About It campaign is a starting point to begin an open dialogue with hopes of helping getting more on the road to recovery. And that dialogue must include a conversation with and about our older neighbors. The Maryland Department of Aging works to provide information and resources for our older adults to live a healthy and meaningful life. The department has resources and information for not only older adults, but their caregivers to help deal with the struggles that come with opioid addiction. And that's where our conversation begins. Let's talk about it with Maryland Department of Aging Secretary Rona Kramer. How has the opioid epidemic impacted older adults, seniors, in the state? I know that the numbers are high, and especially with coronavirus, does that play a factor in how it's affecting our older adults?
To begin with, there has been a 200% increase in cases of opioid addiction in older adults between 2015 and 2019. So there certainly is a problem, just as there is in the remainder of the population. No question about it. COVID certainly has affected the older adult population as it has the remainder, but there are many ways in which it's affected our older adults more severely. Um, the There have been tremendous disruptions in the lives of our older adults. Our older adults have financial concerns, as do the rest of the population. They're in the highest risk group for COVID. Who is dying in the largest numbers during this pandemic? It's older adults. That adds a tremendous amount of, number one, fear, because they know that it could affect them, but they also have a much higher percentage of spouses and close friends and siblings that they're concerned about. And they are the population most likely to have one of those close personal relationships with someone who's in a nursing home. So, and we know that there's being in a nursing home is extremely difficult right now because there's tremendous isolation. And then mentioning isolation again, our older adults are far more likely to be isolated. They have less skill with an opportunity to be using connections through video conferencing than younger adults do. And that's isolating. And many of them are having difficulty just getting groceries and their prescriptions filled. They don't want to go into the pharmacy, they're afraid to go out in public. And so they're concerned about, when am I going to get my next meal? Which, by the way, we can help with at the Department of Aging, so no one should be going hungry, but they're concerned. And when am I going to get my next prescription? So the concerns, the emotional difficulties are ramped up for older adults.
about the opioid crisis preventing some older adults and seniors from getting pain medication. How is the opioid crisis affecting them from getting the medication that they might need just to live everyday life?
You're absolutely right. There are unforeseen consequences to the opioid diversion programs to prevent diversion to people who should not be taking these opioids. Absolutely. Part of the problem that we're seeing is that end of life care has been impacted by it. There are people who are now passing away in pain. And we are working to tackle that issue. Hospice is reporting that they are having difficulty in getting pain prescription medication, opioids, for end of life care. Another problem is that doctors are no longer prescribing as readily as they did previously with opioids, and they're trying to be cautious. They're caught in the middle of this, and their prescriptions are shorter term prescriptions. So now they're not writing an opioid prescription for 30 days. They're writing them for 5, 6 days at a time. And that means that family members who are caring for their end of life family member are having to take the time to go out and get a prescription refilled or interact with the doctor's office to go through the prescription filling process every 5 to 7 days, and they're not able to keep up with it. So that's absolutely a problem for everyone, both hospice and at home. Now, there are many things that hospice is doing to try to prevent the diversion. They found that the majority of the diversion of those valid prescriptions are happening with the family caregivers as well as in-home caregivers as the outside paid home givers, a small percentage only, but and then other family members who have access to the prescriptions. So it's definitely a concern having the drugs in home at end of life. So hospice, at least with its hospice care personnel, they are training their personnel. Many of them are drug testing their personnel now. About 75% of them are, which is very helpful. And they're conducting pill counts, which helps tremendously. So we're working at countering the problems that have been taken place. A problem with a home death is that after the family member dies, the prescription drugs are owned by the family member. And it rarely, the majority of the family members don't hand over their prescription drugs to hospice and say, you dispose of them, which means that they're at home. So something that we've done at the Department of Aging is we've put into place a program. We did a pilot trial program through a grant, and we've given drug deactivation pouches to the public, not just for end of life, for all prescription disposal. And it's very, very easy now to dispose of your prescription medications. We've all heard for a long time now that you shouldn't be flushing them down the toilet, and you shouldn't be putting them in the trash in the landfills. And most of us have said, well, what are we supposed to do then? There are pouches that you can get now through most pharmacies and maybe doctors' offices and from your local health departments. And it's easy. Everyone who has prescriptions that they're no longer using should be just using them to dispose their prescriptions. It's a packet. You open the packet, you put your prescription meds in, you put in some water and seal it up and shake it, and you throw it in the trash. So it's no longer an environmental hazard, it's deactivated, and your family members cannot access your drugs that are sitting around, and you will no longer be you'll no longer be giving the opportunity for your grandchildren or your children who come to visit access that will harm them in the long run. So everyone should be taking advantage of those programs.
Still to come on Rockville 11's Rockville Goes Purple Opioids, let's talk about it special. We're going to talk about the possibilities of how older adults can be more susceptible to opioid addiction. And we'll find out the signs of addiction among older adults. Our conversation continues right after this. One thing I think people are not understanding, or can you touch on, is the fact that our older adults or seniors, are they more susceptible to addiction than younger people? Because of course they think, it's a young people's thing, but based on what you just said, it seems like, especially with end of life care, as we get older, things start hurting. So you might need a little something to help you ease the pain. So it seems like it's the same type of risk.
It is even greater. You are absolutely right. As we age, we are more susceptible to falls that cause broken bones, chronic illnesses, cancer, all types of problems, physical problems that require pain medication in order to control the pain. So, yes, older adults are more likely to have physical concerns that require prescription medications, and they are also more susceptible to emotional concerns that are very much in the background for drug addiction. So, older adults are more likely to be isolated, even pre COVID, much more likely to be isolated. They're much more likely to be living alone. They're much more likely to be depressed, seeing a loved one die, a spouse pass away, changing their entire lifestyle when it happens. So, older adults are absolutely more likely to be facing both physical ailments as well as the emotional concerns. And you add to that the fact that metabolism changes as you age, it makes you more susceptible to reaction to prescription medications as well as alcohol. So our older adults are now physically more sensitive to the medications and to alcohol. They're more likely to have more prescription medications. Therefore, those medications are more likely to have interactions because they are it's easy to mix up your medications when you have a lot of them sitting on your nightstand or your kitchen counter, and certainly it's they're more likely just to have the prescriptions than younger adults. So all of those things combined does make it very important for older adults to be sensitive and very aware of the hazards that exist for them.
And just like you said about older adults being prescribed medications, we had this question come to us from a Rockville senior who, goes to our senior center. And one of their concerns was being prescribed an opioid. Like if they just had a procedure and a doctor prescribes them an opioid pain medication to help them to manage the pain of the procedure, is there a time limit or something that a group of time for after you get the prescription that you could become addicted to it? Because they were concerned that if they take this medication, on one hand, I'm in pain, I need something to relieve it so that I can try to live. And then on the other hand, it's I don't want to get addicted. So how is there a time frame? What should they look for when this happens?
They are absolutely right to be concerned. So your person who came into the senior center, and you in Rockville have wonderful senior centers. Um, they're absolutely right to be concerned. So they should have discussions with their care providers right from the start, before they have a procedure, before or as soon as they're given a prescription. Addiction begins immediately because, and here's a quote from the Mayo Clinic, if I could. It's really very instructive. The Mayo Clinic says opioids trigger the release of endorphins, your brain's feel good neurotransmitters. Endorphins muffle your perception of pain and boost feelings of pleasure, creating a temporary but powerful sense of well being. When the opioid dose wears off, you may find yourself wanting those good feelings back as soon as possible. This is the first milestone on the path towards potential addiction. So, everyone needs to be aware that that's happening to them. Usually, it takes about 2 weeks, but anywhere for addiction to start becoming a concern. But as the Mayo Clinic noted, immediately there are ramifications. So the concept is you talk to your care providers, they know what will be okay for you, and be sure that you're recognizing that it's a problem. You may need it. There's no one is saying you should never take an opioid prescription medication, but you have to be careful, and you should not take it for any longer than is absolutely necessary. There's another concern with older adults becoming addicted, and that is the recognition of the addiction, because addiction signs and symptoms can be similar to what people think are signs of aging: memory loss, impaired gait, the inability to walk properly, falls, the speech difficulties, and frequently people associate that with aging. They shouldn't. It is not necessary for those things to happen in healthy aging. It is not. It's a mistake that people make in their understanding of aging. But addiction is harder to recognize. So family members and the older adult themselves need to stop and take a look at what's happening, either to themselves or their loved ones, and say, maybe this isn't just aging, maybe there's another problem going on.
And thank you so much for addressing the signs that we need to look for in our older adults, our seniors, when it comes to addiction. I really, really appreciate that. That is so key because some people will contribute some of their their older adults, their parents or whatever. Oh, they're just getting old, and if they're dealing with an opioid, it could be that they're addicted.
Absolutely. Or that there are other medication errors happening. Let's not forget that it's not just addiction, but if they're taking their medications improperly, as we noted earlier, when you've got 20 different pill bottles sitting on your nightstand, it's easy to confuse one with the other and remember which you're supposed to be taking. So, medication management is very important. And then, of course, you add to that opioids mixed in. They certainly cause the people can see the signs. Don't confuse them with aging.
There's much more to come on this Rockville Goes Purple Opioids. Let's talk about it special. Next, our conversation turns to getting the help that older adults need to get on the road to recovery. Plus, how our community can be part of the solution to the opioid crisis. Our exclusive talk with Maryland Department of Aging Secretary Rona Kramer continues right after this. The resources that are available for older adults suffering with opioid addiction. I think a lot of people don't realize there are specific resources for our older adults and seniors that if they do feel like they're on the path to addiction or might be, there are resources out there. Can you tell me about some of them?
Absolutely. Interestingly, treatment is more successful in older adults than it is in the rest of the population, which is a wonderful and very hopeful thing for us to know. So, all older adults who are concerned about having an addiction issue should be very hopeful. They first should go to their care provider. They should not be embarrassed about it. There's a stigma, unfortunately, particularly with older adults who haven't been around since we've recognized that addiction is an illness. It's not something to be hidden or to be ashamed about. It's an illness. And if you break your arm, you don't hesitate to go to your doctor about it. There's no distinction between breaking your arm and being addicted when it comes to going to your doctor and saying, I have this illness, it's a problem, I need to discuss it with you. So that's definitely a first step. Um, Older adults tend to be more compliant with treatment, which makes it easier. They'll listen to their doctor and actually take it to heart, which means they're going to deal with their addiction issue much more rapidly and readily. Every jurisdiction in the state of Maryland has an opioid intervention team. Everyone can go to their opioid intervention team in their own county or in the city and get assistance directly for their problems. There is help from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is a national treatment referral. The Maryland Crisis Helpline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they can assist with providing support, guidance, and assistance on accessing the appropriate help. Very easy to remember. Everyone can remember this. call 211 and they will put you in touch with appropriate help. 211, very easy to remember to call 211. All of those are resources that are very easily accessible.
Something else that you brought up was about the stigma of opioid addiction in older adults and seniors. And it's to the point where what do we do as a community is to create and to open the dialogue and to help remove the stigma to this? Because as long as that stigma is there, it seems like it's harder for people to come forward to get the help that they need, whether it's shame or whether it's just really not understanding the effects of addiction and how it goes beyond the person that's addicted. How can we as a community, as a state, as even as the city of Rockville, what more can we do to open that dialogue?
We've come a long way already. I believe that the state of Maryland has tackled this issue. Our lieutenant governor chairs a commission that's been meeting now for a number of years. We've brought our addiction numbers down, our opioid numbers down in the state. So we've really worked already, worked hard and made great progress. But everyone should keep in mind again that addiction is an illness like any other illness. So we have to be careful about how we refer to addiction, and we need to refer to it as an illness, not a character issue, but an illness. And that's exactly what it is. It is a physical problem with brain chemistry reacting to an outside chemical. So it's a brain reaction and it's a chemical reaction. So we all have to look at it that way. The community needs to speak of it that way. Everyone needs to recognize that it shows great personal strength to deal with their addiction or a family member's addiction. That just shows that you're in control of yourself. And it is a very powerful and positive action to take to deal with any drug interaction problem.
Secretary Kramer, you have given us so much information, a lot that I don't think a lot of people were aware of. I appreciate you giving us your time, your expertise, your knowledge, and your help um, in trying to bring more attention to this, especially as it concerns with seniors and older adults. So I want to thank you. Um, Thank you for taking the time with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your concern and your interest. And our older adults are an absolute wonderful part of our community, and interacting with them is always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much, Secretary Kramer.
Thank you.
The Maryland Department of Aging has resources that are available for older adults to not only deal with addiction, but to also maintain a healthy and meaningful life. The Rockville Goes Purple Opioids Let's Talk About It campaign's goal is to encourage conversation around opioid addiction and create awareness about the danger of stigmatizing that addiction. Just know that there is no shame to admitting you have a problem with opioids, and there are people that can and are willing to get you the help you need so you too can be on the road to recovery. You can learn more about the city's campaign by heading to RockvilleMD.gov/RockvilleGoesPurple. For Rockville 11, I'm Kathy Danzler. Remember, Rockville, we're all in this together.